I walked into the boardroom feeling like today was going to be another long meeting about business expansions and projections. That's what I thought anyway. But as soon as I stepped through the door, something felt off. Clarissa, my wife, sat at the head of the table, looking unusually serious. Bianca, her sister, was seated next to her, flipping through a few papers with a sharp look on her face. I paused for a moment, wondering why they both seemed so cold. "Julian," Clarissa said, her voice flat. "Please, take a seat." I slid into the chair beside her, trying to shake off the strange knot forming in my stomach. I had been working my ass off for years, dedicating myself to this company, her family's company. I'd been the one to bring it back from the brink of bankruptcy a few months ago. I saved them. But now, something didn't feel right. Before I could open my mouth, Bianca spoke. Her voice was sharp and accusatory. "We've had enough of your lack of contribution, Julian. You've been coasting, pretending to work hard, but we all know it's not enough." She was practically sneering at me. I froze. What was she talking about? "Excuse me?" I said, my voice a little too calm for how I felt. "I saved this company. I know what you think you've done," Bianca interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "But we've looked at the numbers, and honestly, you've been lazy. You've done more talking than actual work. We've been carrying you for months, and it's time for a change." My breath caught in my throat. I glanced at Clarissa, expecting her to back me up, but she just stared ahead, not meeting my eyes. Not a word of defense. Not a single look of understanding. It was like she wasn't even there. "Is this a joke?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Clarissa's eyes flickered briefly to mine, but there was no warmth there. She cleared her throat, her face tight. "We've decided to let you go, Julian." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My heart started to race. "What?" The words slipped out before I could stop it. "You're firing me after everything I've done? I've spent years trying to build this company up, working ridiculous hours." Clarissa's eyes hardened. "Bianca's right, Julian. You've been holding us back. We need someone who can actually pull their weight." My mind started to spin. How could she be saying this? How could Clarissa of all people let this happen? I had sacrificed so much, all for her, all for this family. I turned to Bianca. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I was the one who saved this company from going under." But Bianca just shrugged. "And now it's time for someone else to take charge. You're done here." The words stung, more than I thought they would. I kept my eyes on the table, trying to hide how much they hurt. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. I stood up slowly, forcing a smile onto my face, even though I could feel the weight of their betrayal pressing down on me. "Fine," I said, my voice controlled. "I'll go, but you're making a huge mistake." As I turned to walk out, I heard Bianca's voice again. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." I didn't say anything in response. There was nothing left to say. I walked out of that room, and the reality of what had just happened hit me all at once. The betrayal, the coldness. I couldn't believe Clarissa had just let this happen. I went home that night to an empty house, just me and the silence. Clarissa wasn't there, and I didn't expect her to be. She hadn't been for a while now, not in the way she used to be. I sat in the living room, trying to make sense of everything. How could she do this to me? How could she let Bianca throw me out like that, without a single word of support? My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Marco, a guy who had been my ally in the business for years. The message was short, but it stopped me cold. "Check your contract." I didn't know what to make of it, but something about it felt important. And suddenly I had this sinking feeling in my stomach that the worst was yet to come. I spent the night sitting in the quiet of the house, staring at my phone, the message from Marco haunting me. "Check your contract." The words felt cryptic, but in the back of my mind, I knew Marco wouldn't have sent them without reason. He wasn't the type to stir the pot unless something was about to boil over. I hadn't thought about my contract in a long time. It was something I signed when I first came on board with Clarissa's family business, Crimson and Vale. Back then, it felt like a formality. But now, it felt like the only thing I had left to hold on to. I needed to know what Marco had meant by his message. So, I grabbed the folder where I kept all my business documents and flipped through it until I found the original contract I signed years ago. The ink on the pages felt heavier than it had before. I skimmed through the clauses, the legal jargon, the promises made, but I wasn't looking for any of that anymore. I was looking for something specific, something I hadn't noticed before. And then, my eyes landed on it. A clause hidden near the back, almost like a footnote. In the event of a merger or restructuring, Julian Brooks shall retain co-chairmanship of the subsidiary known as Crimson and Vale's IP Department, with full authority over all intellectual property assets, and shall be entitled to an equal share of any decision-making authority regarding the division's direction, profitability, and assets distribution. The words jumped off the page, each one carrying more weight than I had ever realized. My mind raced. I'd been fired, but this clause, it gave me power. It gave me authority over the company's most valuable assets, the intellectual property. I sat back in my chair, the shock of the realization sinking in. Bianca had no idea what she'd just done. Clarissa had no idea either. They thought they were cutting me out, but I had something they didn't know about. I could feel the corner of my lips curl into something between a smile and a sneer. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about taking back control. I picked up my phone, staring at the screen for a moment, and then I called Marco. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Julian," Marco's voice came through, sounding calm but with an edge of curiosity. "What did you find?" "I found it," I said, barely able to keep the excitement from my voice. "The merger clause. It gives me control over the company's IP assets, full authority." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then Marco let out a low whistle. "I thought there was something like that in your contract, but I couldn't be sure. You've got leverage, man. Big leverage." I leaned back in the chair, the contract still in my hand, my fingers running along the edges of the paper. "They fired me, Marco. Clarissa and Bianca, they cut me out. They think they can just walk all over me." "They made a mistake," Marco said, his voice steady. "But now you've got the upper hand. Use it. Don't give them an inch." I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation finally settling into place. I've spent years trying to prove myself to them, and this is how they repay me? Well, if they want to play dirty, I'll show them what it feels like. "Don't make any rash moves," Marco cautioned. "Take your time. Let them sweat a little. Watch how they try to fix their mess without your approval." "I will," I said, my voice now quieter, more controlled. "I'm not rushing into anything, but they won't get away with this." Marco was quiet for a moment, and then he spoke again, his tone more cautious. "Just be careful, Julian. This isn't just about business anymore. There's personal stuff wrapped up in this too. And I know you're hurt, but if you're planning on making a move, make sure it's the right one." I let out a breath, thinking about Clarissa, about how things had started. She had always been the center of my world. I never thought she'd be the one to drive me to this point. "I will," I said, though I didn't feel as certain as I sounded. "I'll make sure it's the right move, but I'll do it on my terms." "Good luck," Marco said. "Let me know what you need." "I'll back you up." After we hung up, I sat there in the silence of my empty house, feeling both empowered and conflicted. The weight of the decision ahead of me was enormous. I wasn't sure what the next step would be, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let this betrayal go unanswered. For years, I'd sacrificed everything for this company, for Clarissa. But now, I had the power to take it all back. And I wasn't going to let them forget what they'd done to me. I reached for my phone again, typing a quick message to Marco. "It's time. Let's see how they handle this." As I sent it, a strange calm washed over me. This wasn't just about fighting back anymore. This was about reclaiming what I deserved. I wasn't just the man they fired. I was the man with the power to rebuild, to lead, and to take back what was mine. And that was just the beginning. The next morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table, still trying to process the weight of everything that had happened. My phone buzzed on the counter, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen, and for a moment, my heart skipped. It was Raphael, Clarissa's father. I didn't hesitate. I swiped to answer. "Julian," Raphael's voice came through, gravelly and tight with frustration. "We need to talk." I wasn't sure what to expect. Raphael had always been a man of few words, but when he spoke, it carried weight. He was one of the few people I respected in this business, and despite the mess with Clarissa and Bianca, I still thought of him as an ally. But I wasn't sure where he stood now. "What's going on, Raphael?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. You've been fired, right? His question was blunt, and I could hear the anger in his voice. Clarissa and Bianca, they've made a mistake, Julian. A huge one. I swallowed, my grip tightening on the phone. Yeah, they have, I muttered, feeling the weight of those words sink in again. They're cleaning house. And apparently, I didn't make the cut. Raphael let out a frustrated sigh. This is beyond a business decision. The company's in shambles without you, Julian. We've been getting complaints from clients, suppliers, and partners. Things are falling apart. And without your approval on the IP assets, well, we're stuck. It's chaos. No one can move forward with anything. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the blank wall in front of me. It was strange to hear Raphael speak like this, almost frantic. He had always been a steady force in the company, never one to lose control, but now he sounded almost desperate. So you didn't know they were going to do this? I asked, my voice cautious. I was starting to get a sense of where this conversation was heading, but I needed to hear it from him. Raphael's voice dropped, a mix of anger and regret lacing his words. Number I didn't know. Clarissa and Bianca handled the firing without telling me. I've been trying to fix things on my end, but without your signature, I'm stuck. I can't move forward. The board's all over the place. They're split between supporting Clarissa and supporting me. And without you, Julian, I don't know how long I can keep this together. I sat there, stunned for a moment. This wasn't what I had expected. I'd figured that Raphael would back up Clarissa and Bianca's decision, maybe try to soften the blow, but hearing him admit the company was unraveling without me, that changed things. You want me to come back? I asked, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Is that it? You want me to fix everything? There was a pause on the other end. I could hear Raphael's breathing, heavy with the weight of the situation. I'm asking you to help us, Julian, he said, his tone softer now. I'm asking you to come back and fix what they've broken. This company is built on more than just the people running it. It's built on trust, on partnerships. And I need you to help me rebuild that trust. I closed my eyes, rubbing my forehead. I wasn't sure what I was feeling anymore. Anger, betrayal, confusion. It was all mixing together, and I couldn't sort through it. But one thing was clear. Raphael didn't want me to just walk away. He needed me. And what about Clarissa and Bianca? I asked, my voice tight. What do I tell them? Do they even know you're calling me? They don't need to know, Raphael snapped. This isn't about them. This is about the company, about keeping it alive. If they can't see that, then so be it. I sat silently, taking it all in. The thought of going back into that world, of dealing with Clarissa and Bianca again, made my stomach churn. I wasn't sure I could do it, but at the same time, I knew I had leverage now. Real, tangible leverage. I glanced at the contract again, my fingers hovering over the page that gave me power over the IP assets. Maybe this was the moment I needed to take control, not just of the company, but of everything I had worked for. I'll think about it, I said finally, my voice colder now. But don't expect me to just fall back in line. Fair enough, Raphael said. Take your time, but just know this. Without you, we're going down. And I can't fix that alone. I felt a knot in my chest, but I didn't know what else to say. I'll let you know, I said before hanging up. The line went dead, and I sat there in the silence, staring at the contract in front of me. Raphael was right. The company was in freefall, and without my approval on the IP assets, nothing could move forward. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I was ready to go back. Not when Clarissa and Bianca had turned their backs on me so easily. But if I didn't act now, if I didn't take control, I'd lose everything. And not just my place in the company, but my place in their lives. I stood up from the table, my hands clenched into fists. It was time to make a decision. The next move would be mine, and mine alone. I grabbed my phone and started drafting a message to Marco. It's time to make my move. Get ready. The game had changed, and I wasn't going to let them win, not without a fight. The following days were a blur. I didn't reach out to Clarissa or Bianca, and they didn't try to contact me either. I spent my time alone in the house, going over the contract again and again, weighing my options. It was hard to know what to do next. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back to the company at all, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the reality. I held the power. I couldn't let it go to waste. But it wasn't just about business anymore. The betrayal still stung, deeper than I had expected. Clarissa had been my partner for so long, and now here I was, sitting in an empty house with nothing but the weight of my own thoughts. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. Clarissa. I froze for a moment, unsure whether to answer. Part of me wanted to just ignore it, to let her stew in her own guilt for a while longer. But the other part of me, the part that had always tried to fix things, knew I needed to face her at some point. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. Hello? My voice sounded colder than I intended. Julian, Clarissa's voice came through, low and hesitant. We need to talk. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to say something sharp, something biting, but instead I just sighed. About what? I finally asked, my voice flat. What's left to talk about? You and Bianca already made your decision. There was a long pause on the other end, and for a second I wondered if she was going to hang up. But then her voice came again, softer now. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, she said, almost sounding guilty. I didn't know they were going to fire you, Julian. I thought we were going to have a conversation about everything. You're part of this family, and I never wanted to hurt you. I closed my eyes, the weight of her words pulling me back into the reality of what we had been. I remembered when we used to talk things through, before everything started to fall apart. You let Bianca decide, I said, the bitterness creeping into my words. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. You just let her walk all over me. There was another long pause, and then Clarissa spoke again, her voice quieter this time. I made a mistake, Julian. I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air, but it didn't feel like enough. It didn't feel like it fixed anything. Not the way I had been discarded. Not the way she had let Bianca tear me down, without even batting an eye. You should have stood up for me, I repeated, my voice thick with emotion. But you didn't. You chose Bianca. And now, here I am. Fired from the company, thrown out of your life, and I'm supposed to just accept it? That's not what I want, she replied, sounding desperate now. I want to fix this. Please, Julian. We've been through so much together. I can't lose you. Not like this. I could feel the tears start to rise in the back of my throat. I didn't want to feel this way. I didn't want to care anymore. But damn it, I still did. You don't get to decide how this ends, Clarissa, I said, my voice shaking. You can't just sweep this under the rug and expect everything to go back to normal. I'm not just some employee you can fire when it's convenient for you. There was silence for a long moment, and then she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. Please, she said, come back. We need you. I need you. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel like she meant it. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about her needing me, it was about respect and the trust that had been shattered. I don't know if I can, Clarissa, I said, the words feeling heavy as they left my mouth. I don't know if I can go back to the way things were. Not after everything that's happened. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. She wasn't giving up. She never did. But I couldn't tell if that was because she truly wanted me back or because she wanted to fix the mess she and Bianca had created. I'll make it right, she said, almost pleading now. Just give me a chance. Please. I let the silence stretch between us, weighing everything I had said and everything she had just asked for. I wasn't sure I could forgive her. Not yet. Not when the damage was this deep. But there was one thing I knew for sure. This wasn't just about the company. It wasn't just about business. It was about me. About what I was willing to accept and what I wasn't. I'll think about it, I said finally, my voice quiet. But I'm not coming back unless you prove you can respect me. I'm not some tool for you to use when you need me, Clarissa. I'm not your backup plan. And with that, I hung up. The finality of it echoed in the quiet house. The ball was in her court now, and I wasn't going to make it easy for her. As I sat there, the weight of my decision starting to settle in, I realized something. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about reclaiming my life, my power, and my place in this world. I wasn't going to be anyone's doormat anymore, and I wasn't going to let Clarissa or Bianca forget that. The next few days were like walking through a fog. I kept replaying the conversation with Clarissa in my head, questioning if I had made the right call. She had apologized, but that apology wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to erase the months of sacrifices I had made, or the years of loyalty that had been thrown back in my face like it meant nothing. Marco had been right about one thing. I had the leverage now. The IP clause in my contract wasn't just some obscure detail. It was my key to taking control of Crimson and Vale, to forcing Clarissa and Bianca to realize the mistake they'd made. But the question lingered. Did I want to go back to that world? Was it worth it? The longer I sat with those thoughts, the more I realized I had to make a decision, a real one. Not just a reactionary move based on anger. I had to think about my future, not just my past. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the dozens of messages and missed calls from Clarissa. Some were apologetic, others were more demanding, as if she expected me to drop everything and come running. There were a couple from Raphael, too. He was still trying to pull me back in, but his words felt like hollow promises now. I tapped out a message to Marco. It's time. Let's set this in motion. Then, with a deep breath, I dialed the number I had been avoiding for days, Raphael's. It rang a few times before he picked up. Julian, Raphael said, his voice strained. I've been waiting for your call. Is this it? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Yeah, this is it. I've thought about it, and I'm ready to come back, but not the way they expect. Raphael was quiet for a moment. What do you mean? I'm not going back as just some cog in the machine. I'm not going to walk in there and let Clarissa and Bianca think they can still control everything. If I'm coming back, it's on my terms. I could hear the relief in his voice when he spoke next. Whatever it takes, Julian. We need you, and if you've got the leverage, then we'll use it. It's time to make this right. I let out a breath, feeling a little lighter. I'm ready to push for what I deserve, but we need to move fast. I'm not giving them a chance to backpedal. Agreed, Raphael said firmly. Let's take this to the board. Get your paperwork in order. I'll back you up every step of the way. I hung up the phone, my mind already racing with what had to be done. The wheels were in motion now. I didn't need Clarissa or Bianca to validate me anymore. I was about to take control of my future, and the future of Crimson and Vale. A couple of hours later, I found myself sitting at my desk, drafting a letter to the board. It wasn't a demand, it was a statement. A cold, calculated message that would leave no room for misinterpretation. I was done being the second choice. Done being overlooked. I outlined the details of my co-chairmanship of the IP department, attached the relevant sections of my contract, and made it clear that if they wanted the company to keep running, they needed to recognize my role immediately. I wasn't going to let them pull the wool over my eyes again. Once the letter was ready, I sent it off to Marco, who would handle the legal side of things, ensuring everything was ironclad. Then I took a deep breath and made my next call to Clarissa. It rang twice before she picked up. Julian, she said, her voice sounding a little more fragile than usual. I've been trying to reach you. I want to fix things. Please, can we talk? I paused before responding, keeping my tone level. I've thought about everything, Clarissa, and I've made my decision. There was a brief silence before she responded, almost too quickly. What decision? I'm coming back, I said, the words feeling like a weight lifting off my shoulders. But not as your husband's employee. I'm coming back as someone with real power. I've got control now, Clarissa. And I'm not going to let you or Bianca dictate what happens anymore. I could hear her breath catch on the other end of the line. What do you mean? What are you talking about? I leaned forward in my chair, my eyes narrowing as I spoke. I mean, I've got the leverage now. I've got authority over the company's intellectual property. If you want this company to survive, if you want me back, you'll need to work with me. And that means respecting me, not just as your husband, but as someone who's earned his place at the table. There was a long pause. Are you threatening me? She asked, her voice low and almost defensive. I sighed, shaking my head, though she couldn't see me. I'm not threatening you, Clarissa. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You wanted to push me out? Fine. But you can't run this company without me. And I'm not coming back until I'm treated with the respect I deserve. Her silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can do this, Julian. You don't have a choice, I replied, my tone unwavering. But you can make this easier on yourself. Acknowledge what happened, acknowledge what you did, and we can move forward. I need time, she said, almost pleading. I don't know how to fix this. You have time, I said, but not much. I'll be at the board meeting tomorrow. I'll see you then. And with that, I hung up. My hands were shaking slightly as I put the phone down, but I wasn't nervous anymore. I was ready. The next step was coming. Tomorrow would be the moment of truth. As I sat back in my chair, looking at the letter to the board one last time, I felt the weight of the decision settle fully in my chest. I wasn't doing this for revenge anymore. I was doing this to take back what was mine. And when the boardroom doors opened tomorrow, I would walk in, not as the man they had fired, but as the man who held the company's future in his hands. There was no turning back now. The boardroom was colder than usual when I stepped inside the next day. The long table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the faces around it were tense, like they were preparing for a battle they knew they might lose. Raphael was already seated at the head of the table, his hands folded in front of him, his expression unreadable. He glanced up as I walked in, giving me a small nod of approval, though his eyes were still full of that familiar worry. Clarissa and Bianca were both present, sitting stiffly across from one another, their eyes avoiding mine as I made my way to the seat at the far end. It was clear they had no idea what to expect. They probably thought they had already won. I took my place and laid my contract on the table in front of me, watching them all closely. There was a slight tremor in Clarissa's hand as she reached for a glass of water, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. Bianca, on the other hand, looked like she was itching for a fight. She always did. Raphael cleared his throat, breaking the silence. I called this meeting to address the current state of the company and the issues surrounding Julian's departure. We've been in a holding pattern since he left, and it's clear that we need to resolve this before we lose more ground. Clarissa looked at him with a quiet, almost pleading expression, but then her eyes flicked to me. We've already made our decision, she said softly. Julian is no longer with Crimson and Vale. That's final. Bianca nodded sharply. We've made the necessary changes to move forward. We don't need him here disrupting things. I could feel the anger bubbling up, but I swallowed it down, maintaining my calm. This was the moment where everything could go one of two ways. Either I let them continue to undermine me, or I took control, once and for all. I leaned forward, placing the contract firmly in front of them. Actually, you do need me, more than you think. Bianca scoffed, but I kept my gaze on her, unflinching. You see, I continued, I may have been fired, but according to my contract, I still have authority over Crimson and Vale's intellectual property. I hold co-chairmanship over the IP department. You can't make decisions about this company's future without my approval. Clarissa's face paled slightly as she leaned in to look at the contract. Her eyes flicked from the text to my face, clearly struggling to digest what I was saying. What are you talking about? This isn't possible. Why wasn't this mentioned during the firing? Because you didn't ask, I said, my voice steady. You thought you could just throw me out without understanding the full scope of what I control. But I'm not going to let you run this company into the ground just because of a grudge. Bianca opened her mouth to speak, but Raphael held up a hand, cutting her off. He looked at me, then back at the women across from him. Julian's right. This changes things. Without his signature on the intellectual property agreements, we can't move forward on any new projects, mergers, or partnerships. And that's just the beginning. I could see the panic starting to creep into Bianca's eyes as the weight of the situation hit her. She opened her mouth to argue, but Clarissa held up a hand, silencing her. So, what do you want, Julian? She asked, her voice tense. I smiled slightly, knowing the battle wasn't over, but I had already won the first round. I want respect, I said quietly. I've spent years building this company, working harder than anyone here, and I deserve to be treated like an equal, not like a tool to be discarded when it's convenient for you. There was a heavy silence in the room. Clarissa seemed to shrink in her chair, her eyes flicking nervously between me and the contract in front of her. Bianca, on the other hand, was seething. You're just going to sit here and demand everything from us? She hissed. You've been lazy, Julian. You didn't do half the work you claim to have done. I chuckled softly, shaking my head. You have no idea what you're talking about, Bianca. I was the one who saved this company when it was on the brink of collapse. I was the one who kept it running while you and Clarissa sat back and played at being businesswomen. If it weren't for me, this company would be in ruins. The words hung in the air, and I could see the cracks starting to form in Bianca's composure. Her face flushed with anger, but she didn't argue. Clarissa, on the other hand, seemed to deflate in her seat, her shoulders slumping. "What do you want from me, Julian?" she asked quietly. "What do you want me to do?" I kept my gaze steady, refusing to back down. "I want a place at the table. I want to be part of the decision-making process. I want my fair share of authority over the direction of this company. And if you can't give me that, then we're done." Raphael spoke up, his voice firm. "Julian, I think we can all agree that we need to move forward. If you're willing to work with us, I'll back you up. But this needs to be a clean slate. No more games. No more hiding behind power plays." I nodded slowly, my gaze flicking between Clarissa and Bianca. "I'll come back, Raphael. But only if I'm treated with the same respect as everyone else in this room. I'm not here to clean up after anyone's mess anymore." Bianca stood up suddenly, pushing her chair back with a screech. "You think we'll just let you waltz back in and take control like nothing happened?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You're nothing without us. You've always been nothing." The words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I stood up slowly, meeting her eyes with a cold resolve. "You've made a big mistake, Bianca," I said, my voice low. "And now, you'll have to live with the consequences." The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Raphael spoke again, his tone softer but firm. "I think we all need to take a step back and think about this. We'll reconvene in an hour. Let's all come to a decision." I nodded and turned toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I had laid my cards on the table. The power was mine now. As I stepped out of the room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. I wasn't just reclaiming my place in the company. I was reclaiming my own life, my own worth. Now, it was up to Clarissa and Bianca to decide if they were willing to accept that. The tension in the boardroom was palpable when I walked back in an hour later. Clarissa, Bianca, and Raphael were seated around the table. But this time, it wasn't just a business meeting. It felt like a negotiation for power, each of us holding cards that we didn't want to reveal just yet. The moment I stepped through the door, I could feel the eyes on me. Clarissa's expression was unreadable, but Bianca's was a mix of frustration and disbelief. Raphael, to his credit, remained composed, his hands clasped together in front of him, waiting for the conversation to start. I took my seat again, feeling the weight of the moment. The next few steps would determine everything. I could either let them take the company and move on with my life, or I could stake my claim and rebuild from the ground up. And I wasn't walking away this time. Clarissa was the first to break the silence. "We've discussed things," she said quietly, her voice almost apologetic. "And we agree that we need you back, but not just as an employee. If you're coming back, it's going to be as a leader." I raised an eyebrow, trying to read between the lines. "What does that mean?" She looked at Bianca, who was shifting uncomfortably in her seat, and then back at me. "It means you'll have a say in every major decision moving forward. We'll restructure things. You'll take the lead on the IP department, and we'll make sure you have control over everything related to that." I could feel a surge of satisfaction, but I kept my face neutral. This wasn't just about getting control back. It was about rebuilding the company the right way, one that respected competence and effort over bloodlines and favoritism. "Good," I said, leaning forward, my voice steady. "But if I'm taking control, I'm also changing the way things are done. We need a complete overhaul. No more cutting corners. No more playing favorites. I want the company to succeed based on merit, not connections." Bianca's face hardened, but she said nothing. I could see the frustration bubbling just beneath the surface, but I wasn't concerned with her right now. This was about taking the company back, not about pleasing her. Raphael cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to him. "I think we can all agree that changes need to happen. This company was built on solid foundations, but those foundations have been neglected. Julian's right. It's time for a merit-based approach. If we want to rebuild, we all need to start fresh." The words felt like a victory, but I knew it wasn't enough. Not yet. I wasn't here to fix just the business. I was here to rebuild the trust that had been shattered, especially with Clarissa. I turned to her, my gaze softening just a little. "I'm not doing this just for the company, Clarissa," I said quietly. "I'm doing this because I've spent years believing in us, in what we could build together. But you need to understand that if I'm coming back, it's because I'm respected, not because I'm just a tool to fix things when it's convenient." Clarissa's eyes softened, and I saw something in her expression that I hadn't seen in a long time. guilt, mixed with a sense of recognition. She nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I understand, Julian. I do. And I'll do better. I'll make sure you're respected. You deserve that. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The years of loyalty, the sacrifices, the frustration. Was I ready to forgive her? Could I really trust her again? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing. I couldn't let the past dictate the future. The company needed a leader, and it seemed like, for better or worse, that leader was going to be me. We all need to put in the work, I said finally, standing up. I'll take the lead on restructuring, but I won't do it alone. This company is only going to thrive if we all pull our weight. If we're going to make it work, I need each of you to step up. There was a long pause, and then Raphael spoke, his voice steady and resolute. We're all in this together, Julian. You'll have the full support of the board, and I'll back you up every step of the way. Clarissa and Bianca remained silent, but I could see that something had shifted between us. It wasn't perfect, it wouldn't be, but it was a start. I turned and walked toward the door, my mind already racing with plans for the future. As I reached for the handle, I glanced back at the room. The weight of the decisions ahead of me still loomed, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't just going to rebuild the company. I was going to rebuild myself, and this time, I wasn't going to be overlooked. Tomorrow we start, I said, my voice firm. And it's not just about profits or products, it's about trust. So let's make sure we earn it every step of the way. With that, I walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind the remnants of the past. It was time to build something new, and this time, it was on my terms. The next few days were a whirlwind. I met with Marco and began putting together a plan for restructuring the company, focusing on merit-based promotions, better internal policies, and rebuilding our relationships with key clients and suppliers. I wanted everything to be transparent, no more secrets, no more favoritism. Clarissa and Bianca, though visibly uncomfortable, began to fall into line. They understood the stakes now, and if they wanted the company to survive, they knew they had to follow my lead. I wasn't sure where Clarissa and I stood, but as we spent more time in the office, I started to see small changes in her attitude. She was trying, and maybe that was all I could ask for. But it wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the company, the people who had supported me, and the future I wanted to create. And as the weeks passed, I could feel the momentum shifting in our favor. Crimson and Veil was coming back to life. And this time, I was going to make sure it was built the right way. Months had passed since that first meeting with the board. The changes I'd made weren't immediate, but the shift was undeniable. Crimson and Veil had slowly begun to turn around. Clients who had been hesitant to trust us again were now re-signing contracts, and suppliers who had been on the edge of pulling out were returning. Employees, once disillusioned, were starting to work with purpose and pride. It was a delicate balance of rebuilding trust, implementing strict policies, and proving that our company could succeed without relying on old power dynamics. I sat at my desk one afternoon, reviewing reports and planning for the next round of changes when Clarissa walked in. Her knock was soft, tentative, and she hesitated at the door before pushing it open. "Got a minute?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. I glanced up from my papers and nodded. "Of course. What's up?" She stepped into the room, her eyes scanning the paperwork in front of me, and for the first time in months, I noticed a subtle shift in her posture. She wasn't standing stiffly, like she had been before. She wasn't the Clarissa I had confronted in the boardroom. This version of her was softer, more aware of what had happened and what still needed to be done. "I just wanted to check in," she said, her voice low. "How are you feeling about everything?" I paused, letting the question settle. Clarissa had changed in some ways. I could see it in her actions. She was working harder, taking more responsibility, and starting to show the respect I had demanded. But I wasn't sure if things had fully healed between us. I wasn't sure if they ever would. "It's been a lot," I admitted, leaning back in my chair, trying to figure out how to answer her without revealing too much. "We've made progress, but we've still got a long way to go. It's not just about business anymore. It's about rebuilding trust, real trust, and that takes time." Clarissa nodded slowly, her eyes on the floor for a moment. "I know. I wasn't sure if you would even want to stay after everything. I understand now why you needed to be respected, Julian. I get it. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let her words sink in, and for the first time, I saw the clarity in her eyes. She wasn't just apologizing anymore. She was recognizing that the company's future and her future depended on the foundation we built together, that it wasn't just about business decisions. It was about understanding each other. I didn't want to let you down, she added, her voice quiet now. Not just the company, but you. You deserve better than what happened. I wasn't sure what I was expecting from her, but that wasn't it. She was being vulnerable, more than I had ever seen her be before. I wanted to say something, to ease the tension, but all I could do was look at her for a long moment. Clarissa, I said softly, I didn't do this for you. I didn't do it for Bianca either. I did it for the company and for me. I didn't want to be a backup plan. I wanted to be seen as someone who mattered, who built something worth respecting. She looked up then, her eyes meeting mine, and in them I saw something I hadn't expected. Guilt, yes, but also a sense of determination. I know, she said, finally meeting my gaze. And you've proved that. You've taken control of everything. I've watched you work harder than anyone else here. I couldn't be prouder of how you've turned things around. But more than that, I want you to know that I'm here. And I'm not just here as your wife or the boss's daughter. I'm here as a partner. And if you'll let me, I want to help rebuild what we've lost. The words hung in the air, heavy and unresolved, but for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt like she truly meant them. It wasn't just about business anymore. We had both been through something that had changed us. The company wasn't the only thing that needed rebuilding. I nodded slowly, a small gesture of acceptance. I'm still figuring it out, Clarissa, but I'm willing to try. I don't know what's ahead for us, but I know it's going to take more than just business decisions to make this work. She smiled faintly. I'm willing to do the work, too. The conversation shifted then, slowly turning to the next steps for the company. We started discussing plans for expanding our client base, rebuilding internal structures, and setting new standards. But there was something different in the way we spoke to each other now, an understanding that hadn't been there before. As the weeks went by, the company continued to recover. The board saw the results of the changes I had made, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose beyond just the work. It wasn't easy, and there were still plenty of challenges ahead, but I felt confident in the direction we were headed. The company was thriving, not because of the family connections, but because of trust, competence, and respect. One evening, after a long day of meetings and strategy sessions, I walked through the office, glancing at the employees working late, their heads bent over their desks. I stopped for a moment and just watched them. For the first time in a long while, the office felt alive with purpose, not just for the profit it could bring, but for something more. I walked back to my office, sitting down at my desk and looking at the work we had done. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like we were building something that could last, something built on my terms. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. It was about proving to myself and to everyone who had doubted me that I could build something that mattered, not because of who I was married to, not because of family connections, but because of what I had done and the work I was willing to put in. As I sat back in my chair, I thought about the future, and for the first time, I felt peace. This wasn't just about reclaiming my place. It was about creating something that would outlast any of us. This was my legacy, built from the ashes of betrayal, but forged in my own vision, and that felt like victory.